our next speaker
Perfect.
is is Mary Bolliker. And Mary is a person who grew up with kidney disease, and she's our next speaker. She's going to be sharing about her experience with kidney disease. So, Michelle, thank you so much for sharing your valuable information. I hope you consider coming back to Hope Week again sometime. And it was a pleasure meeting you face to face.
Thanks so much for having me, Cher.
Okay, thanks a lot. And hello, Mary. Now,
Hello.
Mary and I are
Evening.
Mary and I are friends, and it's a pleasure of mine to introduce Mary. Mary is here to talk about making decisions and how she weighs the pros and cons on different treatments. And Mary was diagnosed, I have to take a drink, sorry. Mary was diagnosed with kidney disease at just 9 years old and has experienced the challenges of in-center hemodialysis multiple times throughout her life. At 17, she received her first kidney transplant from her brother, Doug. And over the years, she's undergone 3 additional transplants, with the most recent one in 1999. So we share a transplant year, Mary. I didn't realize that. But this lifelong journey has fueled Mary's passion for supporting kidney patients and advocating for better care. Mary has worked closely with pharmaceutical companies, nonprofits, and university, and has served on several technical expert panels for the Center for Medicaid, Medicare, and Medicaid Services. She's also been a peer reviewer for medical research programs under the U.S. Department of Defense and Patient-Centered Outcomes Research Institute. And she's an active member of several advisory boards for kidney disease organizations. Mary advocates for enhanced healthcare, patient outcomes, and quality of life. As an inspirational speaker, she shares her personal journey to offer hope and support to others facing health challenges. Her book, Maria Never Gives Up, is available on Amazon. So, Mary, would you like to share with us about how you weigh the pros and cons of treatment?
Absolutely. As I know, Suzette's going to pull up my slides, but I just want to thank you for the opportunity to join Hope Week tonight. It really is an honor to be here and share what I call the condensed version. And so, otherwise we'd be here all night. And I think you'd get kind of a little squirmy in your chairs tonight. So I'm really excited to be able to talk a little bit about how I came upon my journey and so I kind of renamed a little bit about just, I'm going to talk about the pros and cons, but I think everybody that is listening tonight and those that may be listening later, that it's important to understand that these are the decisions I made based on my personal experience and what works for me. Because again, I think when we look at pros and cons and different treatment, everybody really, I think, has different ways of looking at that journey and what works for them. And so some of the things that I will share based on my personal experience and why I chose what I did. And I'll kind of walk you through life before kidney disease and then through kidney disease. Again, it's going to be a condensed version. So thank you so much, though. So as I had mentioned, I'm going to be kind of talking about the pros and cons. So next slide. So my life before kidney disease, I'm not sure where the picture is. Oh, there it is. So you see, happy little girl here, and riding my bike, lived in the country, enjoying life, doing all the little things that kids do, chasing butterflies, riding my bike, chasing, animals and playing with animals. Again, I'm kind of like many of the RSN folks, as I'm very passionate about animals. And I think that they have also that unconditional love that they give you to help you through, hard times. So, kind of talking about, really very normal childhood. When I was diagnosed, I was 9 years old. So this is prior to that time. So if you can, next slide. So when I was 17 years old, I ended up, and again, I was diagnosed at 9 with kidney disease. I was in a small town hospital and they couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. So I literally went from like 80 pounds up to, 105 overnight. And So, not knowing what to do, they finally decided to send me, because I was in a rural community, small hospital, no pediatric nephrologist. They sent me to a university hospital where they determined that they needed to do a kidney biopsy, and I was diagnosed with a rare kidney disease. At that time, my parents were told that they didn't think I would make it, that I probably had about 6 months, because at that time they weren't really treating kids. They didn't really know, since it was such a rare disease, what to do. So they did not treat me. They actually, they really looked at symptom management. And luckily I did go into remission, or I wouldn't be talking to you here tonight. But I think one of the things when I was 17, there was the idea that, eventually I might need a transplant as time went on. And as I got older and transplant was becoming a little bit more prevalent. And I think at that time it was like, so we probably need to prepare, myself for hemodialysis. They didn't really give me any other options at that point, so that was kind of an interesting, but at the time, they were like, okay, we need to put a fistula in, we need to get this ready. And we did all of those things. And I ended up on dialysis. And even though we knew that I would need a transplant, we really didn't talk preemptive, unfortunately. I'm kind of a little upset about that, to be honest, like why that wasn't approached. And since we knew that I had kidney disease for so long. So you'll see me riding my bike. So there's kind of this journey as we go along. And so I think one of the things, with in-center dialysis, which is what I did, I think some of the pros is that, it can do the work for your kidneys, which is great. It kept me alive. It helped me feel a little better. I wasn't as retaining as much fluid. But I did not do well on dialysis. I'll be honest. I actually coded while I was on dialysis. And my blood pressure dropped a lot. So, when we talk about, the pro being lowering your blood pressure, the con is also it lowered my blood pressure. And so oftentimes by the time I was trying to walk outside the dialysis center, I was ready to pass out. Again, they were unable, you can see me on the dialysis, fortunately, dialysis machines are a little bit better, not great, but they're a little bit better. And so, this is me just sitting in the chair doing dialysis in the in-center. But again, I was 17. So again, the cons, it was time consuming. The time it was scheduled, there was 2 sessions, there was one in the morning and one in the afternoon, which meant I left school 3 times a week. And so I had to leave by noon to get to dialysis. And I dialyzed 3 times a week. So as you can guess, I wasn't in school much. And even in between, I wasn't feeling great. So, sometimes I made it in between those days, but sometimes I didn't. Sometimes I was at home because I was so weak and exhausted. And, the fatigue, hit me hard. And also I had a lot of issues with potassium. So I ended up in the hospital quite often with high potassiums and things like that. So I think all of those things, I had cramping, I just didn't do well. So those were kind of what I look at personally for in-center hemodialysis. Again, my personal hemodialysis ideas of what I felt were pros and cons for me. And they might be a little bit different for each. So again, I share those with you as my personal experience. Next slide. So continuing the journey. Oops. Back one. Sorry. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. Back up. Okay, there we go. Transplant. So fortunately, my brother came into the dialysis center one day and saw that I was not doing well. And they really did not think I would survive very long on dialysis because of coding and having a heart murmur again, and all of these things that were causing issues for me at the time. So they really felt that they needed to get me a transplant within about 6 months of me starting dialysis, when they realized how poorly I was doing, so that I could actually qualify for a transplant, because I was not getting better. I was actually getting sicker and more weak. I think, with the kidneys failing and not doing well on dialysis, it just was not the answer for me. So transplant. the journey continues. This is me on the far left side. I'm out kayaking, and you'll see me at the bottom sitting on my bed in the hospital after my transplant with my mom. And if any of you recognize the hair from back in the day in the shorts, it was in the 80s. So yeah, it kind of shows my age, doesn't it? Yeah, so anyways, one of the things that I kind of laugh about it now because I don't think anybody does this, but at the transplant center I was at is that it was required that you get up and do your hair and wash your face and get dressed. They really felt that it was a positive image for people to get up and get dressed and kind of have a normalcy. And at that time, they actually, at the institution I was at, no matter what you did, you were going to be in the hospital, no matter how wonderful you might be doing, you would be in there 21 days, no matter what. So I was in there 21 days. I was very fortunate that my brother's kidney was an identical match. I did fabulous with it. It started working, on the table. They were like so excited, such a good match. And again, everything was going well. So again, what I felt like, in my idea of what are the pros is I felt better. My quality of life was back. I mean, I was bouncing off the walls. I was up at night sitting in the halls and talking with the nurses and things that were on night shift. Well, first of all, I was on a lot of steroids, but I was, excited. I was happy. I was, I had energy for the first time. And honestly, I think when you're young like that, and it's been going on for so long, you don't even remember what it's, I didn't know what it was like to feel good. And so, that changed my life. Like immediately, it was like, somebody gave me these superpowers and, I was, superwoman. So I think the other is that I didn't want to continue on dialysis. I knew it was taking me away from the things I wanted to do. I was on 3 times a week, 4.5 hours at a time. I felt better and, like I said, more energy. I wanted to finish school, and I hated missing school. And I had friends there that were great, but there were some that really bullied me because they didn't understand what was going on, and why was my face puffy, and why did I have big ankles, and all these things that happen that you go through with kidney failure. I could finally eat things and drink things that I wanted, as a teenager. So I think for me, it was like, being so empowered. Um, and then if you start looking at the those are my pros. And I could go on about how fabulous I thought that was and how it gave my life back and how, I thought this was the answer to my prayers that I had always hoped that I would be, healthy for the first time is the way I felt in my life. But there are cons. It's a major surgery, it's a big incision. Sometimes the kidney doesn't work right away. Sometimes you have all sorts of issues, there could be bleeding, there could be a variety of things that could happen. There's never a guaranteed. Now I need to be on all these immunosuppressive medications, and I'd been on steroids before. I was back on them again. And at that time, they didn't have a lot of medications out there. So steroids were kind of the big deal. And so again, we know that can also cause issues over the years. And I was young, and what is that going to do long term? Or am I going to have problems with joints and things like that in the future? There's a lot of unknown. But for me, transplant really seemed to be the answer. And I think one of the things that I really found, with going through the transplant, and even though I had my transplant from my brother for 4 years, and I ended up losing it actually with a reoccurrence of the disease, and then I was back on dialysis. Those 4 years gave me the best quality of life that I had known. I didn't know that kind of quality, that you could have that kind of quality of life, to have energy, to enjoy life, to, not have brain fog. Kidney disease caused a lot of brain fog for me. I struggled in school, trying to remember things and, just having a chronic illness. And of course, I think our speaker that we had just before talked to you about so many of the emotions and what you go through. As a child, I wasn't normal like the rest of the kids. No one knew about a lot of the health issues that were going on. So you feel very alone, very isolated. And so for the first time in my life, I was able to, do things. I was able to be at school full time. And, all of a sudden I felt like somebody took, something and put something in my brain. I remember telling my mom, like, why is it easier for me to do these, I'm getting done with my homework so fast. What's, like, I think there was something wrong with my brain, I remember telling my mom. And there was. I had this huge brain fog going on. So again, transplant really made a difference. Unfortunately, I'm up on my fourth transplant. But like Char, 25 years, and my kidney function's great. Doesn't mean that we don't have ups and downs, but for me, the treatment and the answer for me, just because obviously I don't do well on dialysis and I don't have access. That was another whole issue, is my access always failed. So there would be times that I'd be at dialysis and I'd be stuck like 6 times. Sometimes they even sent me home because they felt bad that they weren't able to get something, and they weren't be able to get the needles in. So I think, to me, it's really important, I think, to, what personally worked for you. I knew someone who was on dialysis for 47 years, did fabulous, did home dialysis, before it was even very well known. He happened to be a physician, and he and his partner, was in healthcare as well, and did very well. But I wasn't one of those. So to me, the answer really kind of came back to, you know, really doing much better, the access of having a transplant for my brother, and then, having deceased organ donors as well. Next slide. Next slide. So I think, when you look at treatments and you look at, we're talking a lot about the pros and cons. I mean, I think about that first year after receiving a transplant. Again, look at the 80s. I went to prom. I had a boyfriend. It was like, wow. I graduated from high school, which I never thought would happen. I celebrated with my mom. The picture on the third one is my mom and I had a big party in my dorm. And I was celebrating 1 year. And, I was actually and the third one shows me I was doing a fundraiser for Children's Hospital, and I was doing a dance routine. I'd never had energy to do something like that. I was part of a kick line. I would have probably passed out after kicking my leg once. But, I finally had energy. And so, I share this with you about that year after. It's like, it continued, to make me feel like life was good. I had quality of life. Next slide. So, talking and moving forward, I think it's, sometimes I'll have people ask me, like, and I'm not the only one that said 4 transplants here. But I think sometimes I hear from people is like, how could you go, like they don't even want to, they barely can get through the 1. How could you ever do 4? And I honestly think that for me, I always got I felt so much better that I knew that the answer for me was going to be that having a transplant was going to give me my life back, and that I would be able to participate in life. So as mentioned earlier, I've written a book. At the time, there was no children's books kind of telling the story, kind of having that childhood that's normal, and all of a sudden, boom, something happens. And that's what happened to me. So I wrote my story. My dad really encouraged me to do that. And I thought that wasn't, I really agreed that that was important to actually share. And hopefully, if I only helped one family, one child, I felt like I hit my mark. And I've always felt that way. And I know that it's been used in many hospitals, across the country. And they're in children's hospitals, and they're in dialysis centers and things. And I'm happy that if I was able to add just a little value to help somebody not feel alone, that's kind of why I did what I did. I think the other is the other picture, you'll see me and of course my dogs, as we talk about that, and that's my husband. And we've been married 26 years and have a great life. My husband's retired now, and so am I, pretty much. I'm doing a little bit of consulting, but loving life and enjoying life and taking that opportunity, basically to smell the roses and know that things can change at any time. We all know that. And it's not just people with kidney disease. It's life. You'll see that I actually, then the other picture, you'll see I'm on the far left in that yellow. I actually did a kidney walk for the National Kidney Foundation. It was a 5K with some of my friends. I do a lot of policy work, so I'm in front of the Capitol down below. And I'm walking the Appalachian Trail last year, actually, with my husband and my dogs. And they actually helped us up a couple of the hills, thank goodness. And you'll see then on the top left, those are my nieces and nephews that mean the world to me. They make me get up in the morning. They make me smile. They make me laugh. And it's great having and not having children. My dogs and my nieces and nephews mean the world. They really help support along with my husband and my brother and my mother who are still around. And so you'll see myself and my mom at the bottom corner, who's now 85, has seen me through a lot. And my brother who donated actually 44 years ago. So my journey with kidney disease is like 50 years. So it's a long time, and I'm happy to share my story, and I hope that it inspires you in some way to really look at what fits you with pros and cons of treatment. I also participated in the transplant games and won medals over the years in biking and in race walking, as well as the 5K. I all of a sudden, for the first time in my life, I was able to be athletic, which I'd never been. All through high school and grade school and all that. So all of a sudden the transplant games, and I'm like thinking I'm going to be athletic, but let me tell you, I had to really train because I'd never done anything. I want to share that. Next slide. And so with that, I want to thank everybody for your time. And we're all on this journey together. I hope that you never feel alone.